Welcome to the video on digital accessibility in the university classroom, expert tips for faculty. In this video, we will discuss the importance of accessibility in the university classroom, both online and in face-to-face classes. I'm Kimberly, and I'm joined by our special guest, Dominique, who is an expert in digital accessibility and digital inclusion. Together, we'll explore the challenges that faculty may encounter and provide some practical tips to enhance accessibility for all learners. Let's get started.
Thanks for joining me. Today, we are going to talk about accessibility in the university classroom for online and some ideas for trying to keep us face-to-face classes. And I have a special guest here to introduce yourself and briefly describe your experience and expertise in digital accessibility with our viewers. Thank you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm Dominique, and I'm a former special education resource teacher. I've always had a really deep passion for accessibility and ensuring equal access for students that I've been working with. I started out, most of my career was spent in kindergarten to grade 6 classrooms. When I left the classroom after having my second child, I moved into the world of online business and digital marketing. And during that time, I started to really notice the lack of understanding and awareness around disability inclusion in the online space, and just how much of a really, like I said, just a lack of understanding that there was there. So I've now pivoted my business to focus solely on digital accessibility and disability inclusion in the online space, and helping business owners understand that, yes, there's a legal requirement there, but it really goes so much deeper than that. It's really at the core, accessibility is about making sure that there's equal access for everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much. That is so important, especially for higher education professionals who oftentimes are required with disability accommodation statements and so forth, which I'm sure you're familiar with from when you're working with younger students. But often our faculty wonder what specific challenges their students might be facing so that they can figure out what they specifically need to address. So could you help us explore that a little bit?
Yeah. So really, like, you're talking about accessibility letters and letters of accommodation, that sort of thing. If we're focusing on accessibility from the get-go, a lot of those concerns can be eradicated or even just taken care of to a certain degree, meaning that the adaptations are going to be a lot less if we're planning for that universal accessibility and accommodation in the classrooms.
Yeah. So, what kind of challenges do you notice that students may face when they're, even if we have classes that are face to face, but we often put a lot of our information online and expect students to interact with that information? So, what kind of challenges is it important that faculty understand that students might be facing?
Yeah, and I find even from my work previously with teachers, a lot of times when I think about disability inclusion, we think about the visible disabilities. A lot of times we'll think blindness. I know you have a large audience that works with sign language and the deaf community. We think of those right away. But a lot of times our students and our learners that have, we can call invisible or silent disability, might get overlooked. So some of the things that they're often struggling with might be sensory challenges. So any sort of bright flashing lights, whether that's in a GIF or a meme that you're using or in video content, loud audio, unexpectedly loud audio, things that come on when you're not expecting them to, that sort of thing. We also see a lot of information processing differences, especially neurodivergent individuals. They're often going to be processing that information differently. So that can just lead to challenges in understanding the content, just in how it's being presented. Also looking at executive function challenges. Anybody like myself who has attention or focus issues, I myself have ADHD. So I find that I often struggle with maintaining attention and focus, especially if something is dragging on longer and is maybe a lot more dry and irrelevant than it needs to be. I think we've all been in those classes that could have been summarized down to a few minutes, but we sat there for an hour. So
Mhm.
keeping it clear and concise is also super helpful. And also any students that are struggling with reading comprehension, again, some of those neurodivergent learners or anybody struggling with dyslexia, they might just be facing difficulties in reading and comprehending the text, not with the content itself. So if we can present that content in multiple formats, we're automatically accessing a larger portion of our audience.
And this is important for so many reasons. Obviously, we're there to help our students learn and achieve what they can. Can you help us understand some other reasons why it's important for us to address these challenges?
For sure. And I do find that anybody in the teaching profession, regardless of age, generally wants to be inclusive. It's normally a
Mhm.
matter of lack of awareness of not knowing how. It's generally not a matter of not wanting to. So the biggest reason to be addressing these challenges is to be inclusive, right? It's creating equity in our classrooms, equity within our course structure so that it is accessible to everyone. It's improving those student learning outcomes, making sure that students are actually obtaining what they're there to get out of the course and meeting them where they're at by addressing their needs. Again, it may not be a content issue per se. It's, am I presenting it in a way that they can actually access it so that I can be inclusive? When you're creating inclusive and accessible content, it's a lot more engaging for students. And I would say for all students, because generally that does mean that you're introducing different media formats and that sort of thing too. So there's higher level engagement there. There is that I mentioned legal compliance, and that always
Mhm.
does come into play at the bottom of everything, but that isn't generally our driving force in the teaching fields. It's that inclusivity and equity in the classroom for sure. And just really increasing student satisfaction with the courses that they're engaging in and higher satisfaction levels leading to higher student outcomes. So it's all kind of a big circle and cycle of meeting them where they're at.
Right. And those student satisfaction is really important for faculty because often their course evaluations are a significant contributor to faculty reappointment, promotion, and tenure process. And you're right, faculty do want students to learn and be engaged in their class. Often faculty are overwhelmed, overworked, too many things to
Yeah,
do. So they want to do the right things and make their classes accessible, but they might not know what improvements they can do and that they can do quickly because they have so many responsibilities,
for
even
sure.
outside of teaching in the university. So, what ideas do you have for helping us get in there quickly and make some changes that could have some impact?
For sure. I think the biggest thing to recognize is that when we're working towards being accessible and inclusive, it's not an all or nothing black and white thing. The gradual approach is going to always be more beneficial than, like, say, black or white, yes or no. Right. So
Mhm.
if we can put in a few little things progressively and then over time work towards perfecting, that's great. So some really easy things that can be done that don't take up a ton of time, but do make a massive difference for our learners is using proper heading structure in both our print content and digital content, providing alternate text for images that can be used by screen readers. That's something so simple and yet makes our content dramatically more accessible just by making it accessible to a screen reader. So those don't take a lot of extra work when I'm creating that content, or if I'm going back over previous content, those are really quick little edits that I could
Mhm.
make before I go and print it or send it off to my students the next round. And some other things that can be done, just things like offering transcripts for any of your multimedia content. That can make a world of difference to how accessible that content is. And with us living in the world of AI and artificial intelligence doing all the work in the behind the scenes for so many things, this is something that we can use that for quite easily. We can throw our
Mhm.
video content in, run a transcript, give it a quick look over, make sure we've got it accurate, and then we've got that. Now we've done that level of accessibility. looking at the content and simplifying language wherever possible, not making it overly convoluted and complicated just because. How can we simplify it down? Can we get it down to bullet points? Can we get it just where that core information is really, really accessible to our learners? And then just using a clear, consistent layout for all handouts, documentation, testing, whatever it is you're doing. If you're clear and consistent, it's going to go a long way in reducing those access barriers as well, because students now know what to expect, and it makes sense. It visually makes sense to them.
That's a really good idea. I like to template my weekly plans for my classes. I didn't start it to help students. I started it to make my life easier
Right.
because I just fill in the blanks every week, but I can see how that would be helpful for students. I want to go back just for a second because you said add clear heading, and I'm not sure that everyone understands how valuable headings are or how to make them. Is there a certain number of level of headings? Like I have a main level title of my page. Some people might know how to do that in Google Docs, like click the heading level or whatever. But is there a certain number of headings that are good, or how do we break those up? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a number of headings, but there are a few things there, like you not skipping a heading level. So sometimes we use those headings because we think they visually look better in our document. So I'm going to throw an H1 heading in here, and I'm going to throw an H3 heading in here, and I'm all over the place. When in reality, that H1 heading is the document heading. That's what that is used for. And then the next heading that I see on that page, whether it's immediately after or whether it's further down, should be an H2. I shouldn't be jumping from an H1 to an H4 just because it looks prettier. So there needs to be a clear heading structure in that.
Mhm.
So I would suggest probably heading to YouTube and just looking up how to appropriately use headings in whatever type of content you're creating, whether it's handouts or whether it's slideshows or whatever it is, but not skipping heading levels is going to be important there.
Yeah, I think that's true. Often we're like, okay, well, this one looks like what I need it to look like
Yeah.
right here. It's actually supposed to be the indicator of the level of importance and how
Yeah.
the other information.
That's going to help your neurodivergent learners that are looking at it. It's also going to help your screen reading students as well, because again, those headings do show level of importance. So it helps everybody to be scanning that page and getting a overall view of the document prior to reading all the little bits inside.
So are there other specific design principles that faculty members should be aware of when they're creating content that would help benefit neurodivergent learners?
I think there's some that are pretty simple and again, really no extra effort to implement once you're aware of them. Just things like using clear fonts is super important. I myself really struggle with a lot of script fonts. Again, we do it because it looks pretty, it looks nice, it makes our document look good, and it all lets us be that little let that inner graphic designer come out, but it's creating an accessibility barrier. So using really clear fonts. And again, if you want to know which ones are the best to be using, a quick Google search will give you a huge list of highly accessible fonts that are recommended. So always going for accessibility over pretty is the key there. And so accessible fonts, the colors of your fonts, if you're printing color documents or creating slideshows, it's important that we're looking at color contrast there, making sure that those colors do actually stand out from each other. Again, that's something, there's a ton of places you can go in, put in the hex codes of the colors that you're using, and it'll show you what the contrast level is. And it'll tell you if it meets accessibility contrast or not. And if you want to provide any links in the notes, I can give you some of those links as well for some of the sites I use for that. We've talked about the layout of the content, making sure it's a clear and predictable layout, and breaking information into easy, manageable chunks. So it's not just wall after wall of text. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen this especially in slideshow presentations. I've been at seminars now where it's just a PowerPoint of a wall. So now you've added in the accessibility barriers of I'm sitting in my seat. The content I'm supposed to be working with is way ahead of me at the front of the room. It's a wall of text that I now have to focus on. And if I'm taking notes, I'm now trying to look down here and do that. I've got so many things going on that I've now lost everything I was supposed to be understanding there.
Mm-hmm.
So working in bullet points and then supplementing that with what you're saying or with course notes or whatever, but keeping it manageable chunks is really
Mm-hmm.
important there.
I find that when I'm writing up my weekly lesson plan, sometimes I'm like, let me explain the whole overview. And then I'm like, "Oh, that was like 3 paragraphs that my students do not care to read it that way." So thinking about how I could just be like, okay, here are the top things you need to know this week. Yes. Because I would rather read 3 top things I need to know this week than the bullet point list.
Right.
So I just need to include that. So if a faculty member, I think all of us have heard in our seminars from the teaching and learning centers that we need to be accessible and so forth. But what are some first steps if someone's just like, I don't know if anyone in my student needs these accommodations or these adjustments, but I just want to include it going forward? What are some first steps they can take to optimize their class for all learners, specifically neurodivergent learners?
Yeah. And I think one of the most important things you wrapped up in there, whether you think they need it or not, assume that they do. Because those accommodations that you're putting in place are benefiting your learners, whether or not they've even identified as neurodivergent, whether there's a diagnosis at play. They might just be tired and having a rough morning. And those accommodations, as much as they're necessary for some, they're beneficial to all. So that's the first step, is moving towards that mentality of I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to make that course better. And then just taking a look at, what am I working with? What is my baseline for accessibility here? Just some of the things we've talked about today. Is my content, is it really clear? Are my fonts clear? Or is there good color contrast? And making some of those little minor tweaks, adding alternative text. That's another one we've talked about. But really getting a baseline prior to starting anything is going to be the most important. So I would say sitting with that and saying, where am I at right now? What am I doing? What am I not doing? And if you're really not sure, asking for feedback, either from your students or a colleague, saying, I want to get started. I want to do this. Where am I at?
Yeah. I'm sure people watching can think of some things where they think, oh, I could add some heading levels that are actual heading levels instead of just bolding it and making it bigger on my own, but actually calling it a heading. So as university faculty, we're teaching, there are students, and we often consider them young people, but they are able to articulate things that they need. What are some ways that faculty engage their student in helping make their classes more accessible? What ideas do you have there?
I think the easiest is to just start the open conversation. Make sure that your students understand and are aware that you're open to that conversation. If you've done something or presented something in class that really didn't fit with their needs as far as accessibility, that they can approach you. They can send you that email. They can talk to you after class, whatever it is, and just say, hey, it would be really amazing if there was transcripts with the video today, or XYZ would have helped me. And having that ongoing conversation so it's not uncomfortable and awkward for students to ask for accommodations. And we start that even with the littles in the elementary school setting. Some of my little kindergartners that I worked with, they were able to come and say, I'm having a rough day. I need a wiggle cushion just so I can sit still today, because it had been an open conversation of, we want to meet your needs. And it's the same when we're talking about adult learners as well, involving the students in creating accessible content as appropriate, right? So encouraging that they've also been somewhat accessible in what they're creating. If they're creating a video presentation, are they providing any sort of accessibility accommodation there as
Mhm.
well? But the biggest thing is going to come down to conversation and gathering that feedback, gathering ongoing feedback. It doesn't help me at all to just get the feedback at the end of term and
Mhm.
realize that student X could have flourished in my classroom had I just, I don't know, maybe adapted to his colorblind. Maybe I've been consistently using these colors up on my screen and not realizing he couldn't even see my H1 headings because of the colors that I was using.
That's a really good example of how we can just make things more simple if we have a conversation and check in regularly with our students. I often have a end of class question that's like, what surprised you about class? What's making it hard? What's making it easy? And just those simple questions can
Yeah,
help students be able
huge.
to they can share. So as faculty members, often maybe not everyone, but sometimes I feel like I'm doing a lot of stuff and I'm not getting like, I don't know if it's having any impact. And I think, what am I even doing here? So what are some indicators or methods that faculty members can use to measure the impact of the accessibility improvements they're putting into place? So they feel like there's some return on this investment of, it doesn't take a lot of time to add H1 headings to one lesson, but if I'm doing it every single week, of course that adds up. And it doesn't take a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but I want to know that what I'm doing is having an impact and I'm not just doing this and wasting my time. So what are some things I could be on the lookout to help me feel like, okay, that was a good use of my time to make this more accessible beyond I feel good because I made it accessible.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, I do think it's one of those things that we'll often notice a lot more when it's not done than we will
Mhm.
notice that it has been done. It's like I say to my husband and my kids, you guys never notice anything I do around the house, but you sure notice if I stop doing it because everything starts to
Mhm.
fall apart. So there's a little bit of that at play that we can't ever know the full impact. But those conversations, I think, are going to be the most valuable. And if you've gone and you've tried something that's a little bit different, having that conversation the next time around, like, hey, you know what? Like, I ran transcripts for this today. Did that help you as a whole? And the conversations and those feedback forms that you mentioned as well, those are going to be highly valuable. If possible, putting a question in there specifically about accessibility. Is there anything that we could be doing differently? Is there any accommodations we haven't thought of? And I think over time, you'll also start to see that feedback becoming more and more positive as a thank you for XYZ instead of it would really help me if you did. And so looking for that kind of shift in tone, I think would be really important as well.
Yeah, those are some good ideas about how we can think of what little pieces some check off a box and feel like, yes, I got that one more accessible this time. And that feels good to check off a box to
For
know that I
sure.
did. And I guess sometimes we can see that students do more of the assignment. Maybe they
Yeah.
understand the assignment, they submit it. I don't know if we're going to count that as a major win in terms of this, but anytime they're turning in assignments, that feels good.
Yeah.
That you, okay, they know what we're doing there and they're on track. So are there any other ideas or information or things you'd like to share with our listeners in terms of making their content more accessible in class or the online parts for their students?
I think we've covered a lot of really good things today. And the biggest takeaway I think I would like for everybody is that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And we're looking for progress over perfection because it's really just about making it more accessible to more people. We're not looking to check off just the legal compliance boxes to say, yeah, I did it, I'm good. Like in the teaching professions, we want to be making an impact on our students. That's why most of us got into this. So
Mhm.
that checklist of legal compliance, that's almost a secondary thing. It's not secondary. I don't want to say that, but it is if at your heart of it is we're doing it to be accessible to more people. Accessibility for the sake of accessibility, not for legality.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really important. And a lot of what we covered today is not often in the documents that we get. Here are the things the student needs in terms of your class, that these are things that can be helpful to all of our students.
Right.
And if we're putting those in place, it can make the burden of other accommodations that students need even less. So
For
yeah.
sure, if you've done the work to make the environment inclusive and accessible, then those modifications that do come in with the individual student letters are going to be so much less impactful on your teaching load because you've laid the groundwork, you've laid the base work. And it also makes a difference when we're doing it for all, as opposed to the effort it sometimes takes to make adaptations for an individual student when a wider group can be benefiting from it.
Thank you so much for sharing this information with us today. And if some of my viewers would like to reach out to you, maybe they have other websites and things that they're building and they want to make those accessible and they'd like your eyes on it, or if they just know someone else that could use your information, where might they find you online?
So my website is just my name. It's www.dominiquedunlop.com.
Okay, super. I'll be sharing with that in the notes below as well, so people can find you. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am Kimberly J. Hill, Faculty Success Coach. Keep exploring.